Hello and welcome to my presentation on the domain name system. It's a very complex subject area, so I'll be narrowing it down to one question, and this is it. Is the domain name system the heart of the internet? Well, to answer this question, we need to know two things. What do we mean by the heart, and what's the domain name system? So to start with, I'll be explaining the heart. If I ask you what's the heart, you may think of this, the human heart, or even this, the love heart. Well, in fact, you would be right. As if we look in the dictionary, it can be any of these things and more. But I'm more interested in number 4 and 5, the central part, or most important part. If we take this idea and concept, and keep this in mind for later on, we can now move on to the domain name system and what it actually is. People use the shortened version of DNS, mainly because of the main letters at the beginning of each name, to shorten the domain name system. But it can be summed up in one sentence, and that is simply the connection between many computers through an internet connection. It simply does this by routing your information through the internet. As it creates this route, it has a path, and each part of the path and route has a label. All these labels are added up to create an IP address. As explained in this diagram, you can see the different part, the whole path and the different labels all creating a final IP address. This final IP address can be given a DNS name, and then this DNS name can be given to the final destination computer you want to access. Or, if it's a website, the URL will be the letter form of the IP address. So, what are the three main components of the DNS? Well, the first one is the special database. Like anything on the internet, it's made up of databases, so the DNS needs a database, and it's a very important database as it stores the domain namespace, which is the diagram we saw before. So it contains every label and all them paths I was previously talking about. It also enables the same path to be used again and again, solely because it knows where you are and where you want to go, so it'll be able to replicate the same path. The second main component is the name server. This contains the DNS database that we previously talked about and is accessed by the client, which we'll explain later. It's a crucial link between the DNS database and the client, because it's the only way the client can access the database. Without the server, there'll be no way of accessing the final database. So moving on to the client is any user of the internet. It can be multiple users, as not only one person isn't using the internet at a time. Or it can be multiple users within the same DNS transaction if you're using VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, if you're trying to access and contact another client. But it's mainly people wanting to access the internet. They are sometimes called the resolver, as it resolves the connection between the internet and the computers. But now we know that, we can look at more questions on the DNS. How big is the DNS? Well, it all depends on how you look at it, but I'm going to compare it to the rest of the internet. First of all, physically, it's a lot smaller, as it's got a lot less databases and servers compared to the whole of the internet. And it has a lot less interesting information on it, solely because it only has the DNS database. It doesn't have the varied information that you can find on the internet. But on the other hand, it has very large capabilities, solely because no other database or server on the internet can do what the DNS database does. Solely because it deals with every connection on the internet, so it's very large capabilities and very important to the internet. So is there any laws that can affect DNS? No, there's no major laws in the UK that are set out to ruin DNS, but every URL address for the UK will need to be registered with companies, and this is the major one for the UK. A company will need to register their website with this company, and you'll be able to get the .uk domain name at the end of your URL. This is very useful for the DNS, as it enables DNS to be able to find you, and if it can't find you, it won't work. So DNS needs you to have this .uk domain name. So, is there anything that can stop the DNS? There are a few short-term issues, obviously if the database or the server fails, Obviously, if the database fails, you won't be able to access the pathfinding of information, or if the server fails, you won't be able to access the database. There is a long-term issue, every IP address being used. This will happen as all the IP addresses with more devices are being used up, as all the paths are being completed and every label being used. And obviously, if they all get used up, you won't be able to create a new path, and therefore you won't be able to access information on the internet like you can today. So that would be a very big issue and will stop the internet as we know it. So is the domain name system the heart of the internet? I say yes, solely because without it there will be no way of knowing the correct path through the internet. There would be no way of creating an IP address, and the internet would be useless in my view. I used the following references in making this presentation. Thank you very much.